Hello, everybody. This is Dr. Lisa with Educator Circle for educators who love their work and want to get better. And I want to share with you an amazing person that I stumbled on, Jimmie Trotter, who has written an amazing book that's very timely, very timely wisdom. When I first met Jimmie, obviously I've known him from my social media, but dug deeper when he published his book. I ordered his book. It came on Amazon and I've read it from cover to cover. Trotter 2020, A Southern Black Man's View. And as you know, most of my experience, everybody, has been in the inner cities, large urban school districts. And so I love to find people who have some wisdom to share with issues around the Black family and people who have persevered through some of the injustices that, as we have recently seen happen in our country and in the world. So, Jimmie, would you tell us why you wrote this book? And I'm just amazed at how, this has happened prior to any of this craziness going on in our country.
Right. It's a God time deal, I believe, Lisa.
Yes.
I wrote the book originally to shine some light on Southern living as a Black man and open some lines of communication. And I use, in my book, I kind of talk kind of bold and kind of openly. Of course, on my book, I asked people to allow me to speak freely before they even start reading the book. As the outside cover, it says, I ask your permission to speak freely. And I also make the statement that if you wear your feelings on your sleeve, then go topless when you're reading this book.
Yes.
Because I say a couple of things that are kind of hard, and I use a couple of the nasty words that were used as I grew up towards Black people. And it may be a little bit offensive, but again, my intent is not to offend people, but to offer information and again, to shine some light on living in the South as a person of color. So I use both prose and poetry. And I think I mentioned to you, the prose will make you think, but the poetry, I think, will move you. When you read poetry, that's something that moves your emotions, your heart. And
yes.
So I have both of those in the book, and it makes for interesting reading. People have told me. I think you said the same.
Oh,
it makes
yes.
for interesting reading. Yeah.
Well, just so everybody knows, each chapter starts with a poem, and then it leads into the story behind what inspired you to create that particular thought or that create that particular prose.
Sure.
And one of my favorite pieces that I really believe is going to inspire our audience, those of you who work in education primarily or work with the African American culture across America, when you're dealing with children, it could be people who are working in after school programs, people who they have their schools that they're leading, or teachers, churches. We notice the serious breakdown in the Black family unit. And on page 21, you talk about your checklist and the solid Black family unit. And there is a poem that you have with that called Heroes. Tell us a little bit about that. And I wanted to share something with you that was sort of a thought I had.
Okay. That particular poem, Heroes, now, when I read that poem, it hits me in my heart, Lisa.
Yes.
The poem in general talks about young Black men playing on the streets. It says, no problems, but just summer heat. And those kids in the poem, it talks about they're looking for someone. They're looking for a Black hero. They're looking for someone to look up to. They're trying to find their way. And Black men need Black men.
Yeah.
Young Black men need Black men to verify them, to qualify them, to validate them. And without that, they're always searching. And part of the breakdown of the Black family has been that the Black male is often removed, either by incarceration or whatever has been the problem. So the young Black men are looking for a hero.
Yes.
I go into that chapter talking about heroes that were in my community, and it's a moving story. One person told me to actually enroll in a storytelling contest because it's a moving story about finding your hero, and me in particular, finding Black heroes in my community. And there are heroes out there in every Black community, and
Yeah.
I want to share that with every culture, that in the Black community there are heroes. And but the Black kids are looking around, and sometimes they may not see a hero until they look at you.
Right. And you say in your book that the need is to have a solid God grounded foundation. And today
Correct.
we can see that that's not happened in our
Right.
country. We can see by what's going on right now with all of the chaos, all of the riots, the lack of direction amongst our young people. They're being deceived by other groups that are leading them in the wrong direction and causing them to really not just destroy others' lives, but to destroy their own. And you talk about that, finding that solid God grounded foundation. How is that you were able to do that? And how can we do that for our young people?
Lisa, when I first talked with you, and I actually looked at some of your stuff before I talked with you, I noticed that you had that God grounded foundation,
Yes.
and I knew that we had that in common, and really even writing this book was a prompt for me from God to write it, and I had it on the back burner for a while, and the timing was just right for it. I grew up with my grandparents, and in the '60s, um, and my grandparents, there was no option to getting a religious background or a God grounded foundation when I grew up in that era. It was common. It
Mhm.
was the norm, and unfortunately, the Black culture has gotten away from that. We,
Yes.
as a race, we had no choice but to believe that God was our strong tower. He was our place of refuge.
Hmm.
And we could run into him and be safe. And I think I mentioned that in the book, and he was our place of safety. So I grew up with that. That was ingrained in me. There wasn't a question about that.
Hmm.
Uh, so as I went to school and I moved out into the real world, I ran into, of course, people who didn't have that. And I saw the difference. I knew there was a difference. I had a confidence that was not a confidence in me, but a confidence that was in God that made me solid. And I saw them uh, flux or vary from one thing to the other, trying to find that place to where they could be solid and rooted. So, and that my point in the book is that I suggest and I offer that maybe the Black community should go back to instilling those values.
Well, you say that you had no choice, and really, as a country, we have no choice. We're trying to make other choices,
Right, right.
but we are totally doing more. The more we take our country away from God, the more that we're opening it up for terrible demise. And one of the things that you talk about in your book, you're lost and found, you
Yeah.
were talking about finding your dignity, because obviously you've had a very different experience. I've had experiences as a woman, as you know, that have tried to steal my dignity, tried to keep me down as a person and to thwart my purpose in the Lord. But if people were to be able to follow you throughout your life and see the lenses, the things that you've gone through as a
Right.
Black man, people would understand a lot more about the frustrations. And unless you've walked that walk, then people do not understand. But you say that you somehow found your dignity. Tell about the story about how that is that you found your dignity by serving others. You specifically spoke about your service to the elderly, and I thought that was very profound.
Yeah, and maybe we should just read that poem, Lisa. I think
Okay, sure.
for the audience, and I think it's on page 93. Is that right?
I've got 29.
29. I'm way ahead. Okay. Uh, if you want to do the honors, or I'll do the. It doesn't matter. Go ahead. You read it.
Okay. Lost and found. So he says, years ago, I lost my self-respect. Today, as I was respecting you, I found it. I can't remember when it was, but I lost my dignity. As I worked with the elderly, they gave it back to me. I lost the value of our country's liberty. My visits with prisoners in jail gave it back to me. I had even lost the joy of living and giving until the eyes of my grandbaby showed me what I was missing. Now I know the awe of life in every single sight and sound because I no longer live life in the lost and found.
Okay, so what do you feel, Lisa, when you read that?
Well, I felt something that I didn't realize was the backstory. And so then when I went into the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
when I went into the story about you over on page, let me see what page it was, but you talked about how you working and serving and helping the elderly, you realize you had a life of value. But when
Yeah.
I was reading this, the words that really were profound is dignity.
Right.
And this whole deal about losing the value of your country's liberty.
Yeah.
Many of us have experienced, as we try to serve what we believe our country values, as we give our lives to things that we believe are part of what our country exists. Why do we exist? Why is America here? Why was America founded? What are the purposes of America? And then when we see things working against those very purposes, it can be confusing. So that was the feeling. If you've experienced that, and we've all experienced it different ways, where America, the very powers that be in America, work against the very vision and mission for America.
Yes.
So when you were saying that, I began to feel those sentiments, and I knew that lens for you meant something different than it meant for me. But I believe we've all dealt with that in different aspects.
And as we go into the drug facilities here in Pensacola, and I've ministered there for over 15, almost 20 years here in Pensacola, and my wife and I, we both go in. And in some ways, at least you and I and my wife, we're ministers of reconciliation. There's a great divide. There's a chasm. There's a gap that we have to bridge between people of color, between Christendom in our society.
Yes.
And we as a nation, we dropped the ball, and Christendom has dropped the ball because we've been the silent majority for so long. And what happens when you're silent, by default, you allow the voices that are speaking to set the tide and set the course of your arena and your surroundings. So I'm adamant about talking to the silent majority. And here in the Bible Belt, those are the Christians. And we're the silent majority, and we're allowing things like a prayer to be taken out of school, which is, who in their right mind, Lisa, would say, let's take prayer out of school? Who in their sane?
Well, and that's exactly what's caused, the schools have now become, we talk about the breakdown of not just the Black families, but all family structure. Right. And because all families, we have had such fragmented families in society, the children are coming to school and the schools are having to be surrogate parents. Right. And we see the chaos that it has created in COVID. Right. And the education had to be done remotely, and the teachers were not there with their hands on. And we can see what taking the church and prayer from the schools has done. And let me ask you, how good is it to help a child to be academically smart, but not to have a character developed? And where do you get character developed? Where is your guide? It's by the word of God. And if the kids are not exposed to that, they're not exposed to it like you and I were growing up, then how were they going to be exposed? So I really believe that God's doing a major reset right now.
Yes, yes.
And even though there are some terrible things happening in the world, I really believe he's going to bring good out of it. That it's waking us up, it's waking the church up. Let's stand up and take a stand for our children. And let's take a stand for our families and society. This is what we have to do. What
And
do you think is going to be the answer for turning this around? What's happening right now?
let me address your statement about um, developing that Christian character. I often, a couple of things I often say. One is that weeds will grow naturally. I'm a landscaper. So
Mm-hmm.
weeds will grow naturally, but you have to plant flowers, right?
Right.
So as your kids are growing up, they're going to get that world influence. That's going to come natural. That's going to be there. But you have to intentionally instill those godly principles, morals, and standards, values. It's the parent and the grandparent is the society's responsibility to make sure that our kids get that. And we were getting that at one time in school when we had prayer, but that's been removed. So now we have to make a conscious effort to plant those flowers, plant that good word in our kids. And part of our nation's turnaround is going to be, again, Christendom speaking out. We need godly leaders. Of course, that'll take me to me running for a county commissioner also. But we
Yeah.
need godly leaders, leaders that are depending on God to help them with every decision they make, that are not depending on their own agenda or party affiliation, but depending on God to give them wisdom, like he gave Solomon, wisdom for every situation. And we say we want a nation under God. Are we really? You know,
Yeah.
we say we are, but if we are, then again, I want to provoke Christendom to take their part
Mm-hmm.
in politics, take their part in education. We're supposed to be salt and light. We're supposed to be the influential factor to the entire world. And then I think we've lost that. We've been negligent in doing that. And now we're in our country's in this state of flux, of change. And I think God allowed all these variables to come into play so that we have to really look and find our place. And our place is in him and knowing his values and having his values set our values in our society. Otherwise, we become chaotic, which is what we
Right.
see. Otherwise, we become barbaric, which is what we see. Otherwise, we become ungodly, which is what we're going towards.
Yes.
So
And we have a real rebellious towards leaders and anyone who stands for those godly principles.
yes,
As a society, we begin to attack them. It said in the word talks about in the last days how the good will be made into bad, will be deceived and made into bad, and the bad will be made into good. And I can remember during my days as a school leader, uh, anything good that I was trying to do to develop the teachers, to invest in my teachers, to uh, take my children and to expose them to different things, they would make false accusations as if it was some type of wrongdoing. I remember taking my 12th grade boys to see a Broadway show. I took the whole class of all, because, it's hard to get them to be interested in Broadway. And I told you I had all African American kids,
right,
right? So
right.
you can imagine me taking my young men to see, I think it was Young Frankenstein, because I had to pick something they'd be interested in. And they had a ball. And do you know, one of my young men went off to California and worked in the special effects because of his graphic design, whatever that career is, where they do the special effects on the stage. And that became his career. And just the exposure of that one and I really believe that's what we have to do with our children. Right now, we can't fix the homes immediately. We can work towards that, but we can put certain types of things within our schools so that the type of education we're giving them are the same that we would give them as if we were raising them in our own homes, preserving our childhood, making sure that they're getting the opportunity to be kids, being able to play, being able to explore different things, different areas of interest, not this traditional schooling that we're giving them. We'd be bored with it. Of course they're bored with it. And you're not going to be able to give an 8-year-old child a 2.5-hour test and
Right.
expect them to do well on it. These are some of the things. So, you know, that's kind of my little soapbox, but tell me a little bit about what you're running for in Pensacola and why you're running for office and what you hope to accomplish.
Okay, that's a whole another ball of wax, a big ball of wax. Uh, I'm running for county commissioner for our district in District 1. Let me say this, the color of Escambia County is changing. Uh, um, this change that our nation is going through right now, I think all people of all colors are realizing that we have to do better.
Mm-hmm.
We have to really believe in inclusion, where we don't leave anybody behind,
Yeah.
where we see all people as having certain rights and values that have nothing to do with skin color.
Yes.
So I'm running in this area because here in the South, we've had a certain type of government um, that's been predominantly all of one color. I'm trying to find a way to say this and be sensitive
Yeah.
to the issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the color of our county, the color of this region is changing. So we need more representation that actually shows the diversity of the demographics in our area.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm running to try to get more color on our commission here in Pensacola, in the administration in general. We have a minority district here. The way we're vote here in Florida is by district format. It's not at large. So district format, we have 5 different districts and we have 5 representatives, 1 for each district. And but as our numbers are changing, they keep changing. And I explain this in the book, and it's kind of crazy, but they move the lines, the geographical lines on the district for the minority district every 10 years or so with the census, which means they're trying to keep all the minorities in a certain area so that that area can be called a minority district. Well, we move around and they're becoming more of people of color. And when I say minority, I mean black, brown, and all the
Mm-hmm.
above.
Yeah.
So we got to do away with that model somehow so that we can get a true government that represents the population and the demographics of the area. So I'm running to try to get that point out there. And there are certain things that I like to see, and I'm in Escambia County, and I want Escambia County to be the envy of all the counties around us. And that can be done. Your commissioners have that power to really do things for your area. Let me just say one thing, and I'll get out of this soapbox, Lisa. Property tax. Our values are growing here in Escambia County, and I figure they are too in Tampa. And as your values grow, your property tax can actually decrease. The mill rate can be changed because it's a revenue thing that we're dealing with. And as your values go up, you can cut down the amount of your mill rate and still get the same amount of revenue and not lose anything, but it can be a reduction in taxes for your people. So I'm running just to try to get more color in the administration, so we can because we want to represent. Government should truly represent the people that it governs, and in order to do
Well,
that.
and I think it's really bigger than that. I know what you're saying. I agree that that's necessary, but I believe that the reason you're running is because not just because of color, but because you want to represent what good, sound leadership looks like, and you want to be in a position so that people will follow the leader. And, you know, if you do have the voice of the African American community, the Black community, then you are going to be able to accomplish much more than if somebody that they don't know and don't trust is in leadership. So you have the ability, because you already have the relationships established and you have the wisdom and a plan to bring about the necessary growth and to bring into reality the vision that you have. And as opposed to, you know, somebody else, they may not know what kind of vision that's needed because they don't have your experience.
Right.
Your experience and the lens that you have on life gives you a certain vision that needs to be brought into fruition. And it's not about race, but it's about the fact that you're race, your ethnicity has given you an opportunity to experience similar things with the constituents. And because you've had that experience, you have a unique vision and you know how to bring about reality that needs to bring people back into a place to where they're positive contributors to society, where they walk in a world, walking in purpose, where you say in your book, I love the story about Principal Mr. B,
Yeah.
where the wisdom of Mr. B. And I would say that I have been there. And Mr. B is talking to you, and you are basically a troublesome kid, right? You're fighting a lot in school.
Yeah. We were
And
fighting in the kitchen back in then. Yeah.
yes, and he, instead of putting you on some type of punishment,
Mhm.
he has a heart-to-heart talk with you, and he says, he gives you the advice. Do you remember what that advice is in your book? Or do you
Yeah,
want me to
and
read it?
I hate spoiling it for our readers,
Oh,
but
well,
let's just say the title of that chapter is Cats and Dogs.
cats and dogs.
Yeah, and Mr. B
Yes.
tells you
And
about cats and dogs.
and he
But in that chapter, I tell this guy, he totally our expression that we use in some communities, or he flipped the script on me. He changed. He rocked my world. I say he shot me like a bullseye into my future with a purpose and with an expediency.
There you go.
Yeah, he did
So
it. But he
you
did it.
are that, what I'm saying is he said something to you
Yeah,
that totally changed. Why is it that you are, how can you change that anger? How can you use that aggression and
right.
change it? And he gives you sound advice. We won't spoil it. We're just going to say a teaser. If you want to know exactly what it is, you read through the email. And I put a little teaser in my publication as well.
Okay.
Find out what the wisdom of Mr. B was. But the point is that because of him speaking into your life,
Right.
even though he wasn't of your race,
Right. He wasn't.
he saw your heart. He spoke into your heart. He made that point to connect with you. And you know how to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why you need to be a leader. That's why those of us who work in education need to be working in education, because we know how to find those teachable moments, to
Right.
build the relationships with all of those, everybody, all the stakeholders, and we know how to speak into their lives in a way to bring about change. We know how to guide that change. And, not to promote my own book, but I call that visioneering. I wrote a book
Yeah.
called Visioneering.
Yes.
And it's all about, and that's exactly what you're going to do as commissioner. And I'm going to speak that. You're going to be elected into that. And we're going to see you do some great things. And I'm going to be there supporting you, even though I'm far from you. I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to support you. I really believe your story, although this is short and simple, you all can read
Yes.
this in just a little while. It is so profound. And I'm so grateful to have stumbled on you. This is incredible.
Well, it was a God deal, and Lisa, I remember reading this somewhere. The question was, what causes some people to succeed, and what causes other people not to succeed?
Yes.
And the question was, could it be a book that they read or didn't read, or was it a person that they met or didn't meet, or was it a movie or a musical that they didn't hear or watch? And I think it really does come down to that, Lisa. It comes down to a book that you need to pick up and read. It'll change give you a paradigm shift. You'll hear something or think something that you never thought of. It could be a person you run into. If you're sick, you need to go to the doctor. But if you're just down and out and not motivated, you run into the right person, all of a sudden your world gets changed by that person.
Yes. That is so true.
Yeah,
And we want to be those people.
yeah, we are those people. We're salt
Yes.
and light. Yes, we are.
Yes.
So I believe the book can it's a simple book, and at least I intentionally made it simple.
Yeah.
And the prose and the poetry together, they strike a note in your heart. And I believe it opens some lines. And of course, there's a future book, but this one I think I like for people just to read, just to get to know the foundation, to get a foundation, and then we can talk.
That's phenomenal. So Jimmie Trotter from Pensacola, Florida, you are running for what?
County Commissioner, District 1 here in
And when
Pittsburgh.
is the election?
August. Actually, August, all the people running in this particular category are of the same party. So in the primary, we'll decide who will take the office in August.
Okay. And your book is called
Trotter
Trotter
24,
20.
a
And
black
they can
man.
find it where?
It's on Amazon. It's on Amazon, and we're looking to put it in some stores also. But right now on Amazon, A Southern Black Man's View. And I talk and I say, spoken words are like snowflakes in the summertime. But I'm excited that I had a chance to actually take those words and put them in writing and make them more concise and let you hear my thoughts and see maybe a different view.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. This has been Dr. Lisa with Educator Circle for educators who love their work and want to get better.